Hello everyone, this is Damon with PixNub Software, and for this video I'm going to be discussing the auto clear feature in Easy Green Screen 6.5.4, and if you've not updated to this release, I highly recommend doing that. The auto clear feature now has 4 modes, and this can work for almost any type of image where the person's holding a softball bat or a hockey stick or whatever. This is going to allow you to automatically clear the edges of the image without automatically erasing any parts of your foreground. And so this feature is, I don't use this phrase often, but this is a game changer, seriously. I am more excited about this feature than I have been about anything in Easy Green Screen in a few years. It allows you to shoot with a smaller screen and a smaller floor setup, and that has a couple of advantages. First, it's easier to pack and easier to set up, but second and more importantly, a smaller setup is going to have less green spill. Now, I know a lot of people think that you can counter green spill with your lighting setup, and yes, that is true to an extent. However, the laws of physics are what they are, and you will always get more spill with more green in your setup. So imagine if your screen was out here past the camera frame and you have lights that hit that screen. It's going to reflect green light onto the person. If you have floor that's in front of them and you have lights hitting the floor, it's going to reflect green light onto the front of the person. That's just the way it works. So by reducing this size, you can reduce green spill and add no time to your post-processing if you can get this extra stuff removed in batch. Now, I'm not going to demonstrate this in batch mode because I want to explain things, but these same options are available in the batch processor as well. So I'm just going to demonstrate this here. I'm going to set it to 40 pixels and run the default mode, which is select subject only. Oh no, first I have to extract it. So let's do a quick extraction here. Since I'm here, I'm going to defringe that by a couple of pixels just because it looks a little bit cleaner. And by the way, any settings you use in Easy Green Screen, you can set a preset for that. And when you batch process, you can batch process with that preset. So you can batch process with the exact settings you want. And then also use this clear mode in your batch. Alright, so I'm just going to demonstrate this here and hit auto clear. This takes a few seconds to run. So you see it's instantly cleared around all that extra clutter that was beyond the screen is gone. So I'm going to explain this. I'm actually going to break it down step by step what's happening. And then I've also got another image too where the softball bat in this particular image poses a problem for this first mode. And we've got other modes to deal with that. Okay, so I'm just going to stick with this image for this right now. So what this is doing is it's first on your foreground layer, it's going to run a select subject. And this is Photoshop's new artificial intelligent selection process that it tries to figure out where your subject is and make a selection. However, it's not perfect. You see it missed part of the flag here. The next thing it's going to do is it's going to expand that selection and it's going to create an additional mask. Now I'm going to create that mask without expanding the selection just so we can look at what it does. So just based on select subject alone, you see if we rely on this for clearing things out, you might miss parts like this flag here. So that's not good. You don't want, especially in batch, because you're going to end up with lots of images that have issues. So I'm going to back out of that here. Or I'm going to undo that layer mask. So with this this radius here, it's going to expand your selection, and depending on how close they are to the edge of the screen, and I recommend keeping a little bit of distance so this has room to work. But in this case, I'm going to use 40 pixels. And as a general rule, you want to use as large of a number here as you can based on your images. So if you have a little more room, go ahead and use the default of 100 or 200, whatever your photo shoot has the room to do, use that, because it's going to ensure that there's no issues with missing parts. The larger you make that, the better it's going to work. So in any case, let's go to this layer group. This layer group is what contains all of the easy green screen extraction, and it's going to just put another mask on that layer group based on that selection. So what you see here is we got a rough outline, but an expanded outline of the person. I'm going to disable the easy green screen mask and the spill correction so we can just look at what's happening with this top mask it makes. So it's just giving you a rough selection, and that way anything easy green screen does, it really only needs to worry about that outer edge of green for it to remove, because everything else is being cleared out by this top mask. I hope that makes sense. This is a double masking technique, and it's a fairly advanced technique, but one that a lot of people who do manual extractions will do similar techniques to this. Okay, so that's how this select subject only mode works. Now I'm going to go to this next image, and the first thing I'm going to do, let's crop this image, because I want to explain this two ways. First, if you don't have green all the way on the bottom of the frame, and second, if you do. So let's Alright, so let's just run this. I'm just going to skip the user interface, run single mask, skip UI. Now I've tested this image a few times, so I have an idea here. I think I'm going to go down to 20 pixels on this. See what happens. Okay, so yeah, so at 20 pixels, you see that bat, a lot of it got erased. And so let's explain what's going on here. Well, first I'm going to demonstrate this next mode, the select subject plus face detect full. Let's run this auto clear. Just to show you we have a mode that's going to work for this. But then I want to explain what's going on so you have a better understanding of the process. So you see that in that mode, it cleared out the edges, but the bat was not erased. So what this is doing, okay, sorry, I'm trying to think of how I'm going to actually explain this. I think I'm just going to take it step by step through like we did on the last one, so we can kind of see what's happening. So let's make a select subject on the foreground. Now I've noticed that select subject with stuff like softball bats, it's like 90% of the time it pixels up okay, but then there's that 10% of the time where it really doesn't. So this is one of those times where this image, it didn't like what it saw in this bat. So it always selects the person okay, but it's just these extra objects that it might miss. Then let's do an expansion. So depending on how much you're expanding in here, let's try it at 100 and see what this does. You see at 100, it almost swallowed that whole bat up in its selection. Okay, so at 150, then if we went to use that and put the mask in, you see that also worked for this particular image. However, you can't rely on having to increase this, and depending on how long, like if they had a hockey stick, 150 might not have even been enough. So we've actually got a different mode here for this, and it's the select subject. That's this SS means select subject. There just wasn't enough room to fit it all in this drop down, but select subject plus face detection. So this is going to do a combination of that, what this first part does, but then it's going to do an additional face selection and foreground recovery. So I'm just going to explain this step by step because it'll make more sense. So let's run the select subject. I got to be on the layer here. Let's just say we were using 20 pixels here for the expansion. Okay, so then once it has that, it's going to put that into the into the layer mask, and you see this bat's got erased. But it's now going to run a face detection, and you don't need portrait crop face detection system for this. I've actually went and robbed the code that's needed just to get the coordinates of the face, and I've embedded that in Easy Green Screen. So it's going to figure out where this face is. Once it knows that, you can go into the foreground mask. And this is the original Easy Green Screen mask. And so now that it knows where the face is, it can just start searching from there and include any parts of that mask that are white, that are opaque. You got to make sure when you're running this, you don't have like these armor bats not sticking off over the edge of the green, because it's going to make that connection of opacity, and then it's going to not recover or not clear this area. So I can demonstrate this with the magic wand here. If it just finds the face, it can run this selection. Now you see it's selected all of the person. And the magic wand, just like the select subject, is not incredibly accurate, especially for detail, so it's going to also expand that by the same amount. And then in this mask where the select subject missed, it can fill that back in. So now you see that we were able to successfully clear the edges and not erase any of that bat. So that works really great as long as nothing in your foreground overlaps the edge of the green. So that's why on this image I cropped it first, because now I want to explain for the case. Well, first let's go back to this one here, because this one's a little easier to understand. So this mode with the select subject plus face detection full, if you're running a batch process, this is the one I suggest to always use, even over this first one. It takes a few extra seconds, but it ensures that you're not going to have any missing parts in your foreground. But if you use this one that's select subject plus face detection full, the feet cannot stick out past the floor. Nothing can stick out past the edges of the screen. If you follow those rules in your photo shoot, this will work 100% of the time. Now for the case of this image, let's go back to the original image here. I'm going to have to re-extract this as a whole image. So for the case of this image, their legs are sticking out past the edge of the green. And that's okay, because when you're shooting, you might not have any intentions of using the legs in the final shoot or in the final composition. So if that's the case, it's actually better to not use a floor, because again, that's less green spill. Don't use a floor if you're not going to have feet or legs in the image. And if you're going to have, a 3/4 shot, you might bring the green out so it's somewhere in there behind them. But again, don't use more than you need and introduce more spill than you need in your image. So for this, I will demonstrate though. If we run this clear mode with select subject and face detect full, it's not going to work. And we do have another mode that will work for this, but I just want to show you that this didn't actually clear anything, because this mask here, you see that it included all of those areas. Because what happened is that face detection when it came in here, it selected all of the connecting opacity areas that were connected to the face as far as it followed all the white, if that makes sense. Let's throw this mask away, and I'm going to demonstrate now. Okay, so this select subject plus face detect 1/2. I'm just going to run this on the image and then I'm going to explain what it did. Okay, so now you see for this mode, it cleared everything out and it did not erase the bat. And the only thing you have left is a 20 pixel radius around the areas that were beyond the green screen. Because, well, let me show you how this is going to work. Because the thought is if you're not using green screen in those areas, you're probably not wanting those areas of the image anyway. So when you're dropping it into your template, if you're just doing something like that, it's not going to even matter. But let me break down what this is doing with this 1/2 and 3/4. Just going to start over here. I know this video is getting a little bit long, but if you're going to be doing batches of hundreds and even thousands of these images, you really need to understand what these do so you know which one to select and why you're selecting that particular mode. So first thing any of these bottom 3 modes are going to do is do that same select subject. Then once the subject is selected, honestly I don't usually recommend doing 20 pixels. That's kind of small because you could lose strands of hair, but we'll do 40 pixels for this, and it's still at 40 pixels loses part of this bat here, so it'll still work for this demonstration. Okay, so it ran the select subject, it made the mask, and it loses, oops, didn't want to paint that, loses part of that bat. So the next thing it's going to do, it's going to run face detect, but that 1/2, what that means is it's only going to look about halfway down the body length from anything connected to the face. So if anything on the arms were sticking out, it's still going to ruin the whole process and select all that. But if it's just the legs sticking out, and this 1/2 does not mean 1/2 of your camera frame, it's using face detection, and so it knows the size of the face, and so it guesses based on that the size of the body, and so it attempts to only follow the opacity about halfway down. I think the best way to demonstrate this is a little different than exactly how it works, but I'm just gonna fill this in with black. Okay, so now if we run this magic wand tool starting at the face, you see that it selects anything connected and only halfway down, and none of this stuff is selected here because there's no connections being made. Then also the magic wand, of course, is it's not perfect selection, so it's going to expand that as well by the same amount that the select subject expanded. Now we can come into this where we're missing that part of the bat. And so then it's recovered that. Now the only reason the legs are missing here is because when I filled that with black there, that was just for demonstration. That's not actually the exact process of what it does, but it was just kind of to illustrate. I'm going to show one more thing just because we're here and I saw something that I could show you a quick trick. Now this of course is not going to work in batch mode, but if you want to get a full body extraction where they're sticking out past the screen on their legs, so first thing I'm going to do is run this auto clear face detect 1/2. Oh, by the way, 1/2 and 3/4 before I start here. 1/2 follows about halfway down the body. 3/4 will do the same thing but follow to about 3/4. And in this case, 3/4 wouldn't have worked because part of their leg is sticking out off the screen still at that point. So anyway, I'm just going to run the auto clear 1/2. And so this right here, what I'm showing you, is a good technique if you are doing extractions one by one and you want to clear out some of those areas that were beyond the green screen. And so once you get to this point, if you just run the select subject, by the way, the select subject in this panel, it does the same thing as a select subject in the Photoshop menu, with the exception that this will actually select your layer for you. And so doesn't matter what layer you're on. It's going to select the foreground layer, do the select subject, and then it's going to select the mask for you, and it's going to set the brush tool for you. And I believe it actually resets these swatches for you too. So it does a few things, so it does save you some time to use this one. But in any case, and for this, now that we've got the subject selected, we can do a select inverse. Now we're selected outside the subject. Switch our brush to black, and now on this foreground mask, to erase those areas, we just take a black brush and paint those off. And since we have that selection made, the area of the person is deselected, so we can paint right over the edges. Now there is some cleanup you'd have to do. You could deselect, and then any pieces where the select subject wasn't perfect, you can go in and touch those up. But it gets you a really good starting point. So if you didn't shoot green full length, it's not too bad to do. But again, that of course is not something you can do in batch with those legs that are off the green and have it be perfect every time. So that covers that. I will show you too. Now this is not built into the sports photo automation yet. It will be in the future, but it is built into the Easy Green Screen batch processing system. So if you want to run these in batch, you run the batch processing for the extractions only first, and then if you're running the sports photo automation, you can take all of the extracted images from the Easy Green Screen extraction and then run those through the sports photo automation because it can run with pre-extracted images. But you'll see we have those same 4 modes, and so all those modes I discussed, you can select any of those to run in the batch processor. Oh, and I will point out too, I forgot to mention this earlier, these bottom 3 here, those will not work if you're in trial mode. You'll only have the select subject only. I'm just going to open an image so I can explain why here. Now, I should have mentioned this at the beginning of the video, but if you're in trial mode, let's just run an extraction here. Now I'm going to simulate it. Actually, I take that back. Well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to actually put this in trial mode, and then I'm going to run the extraction just to explain why those bottom 3. Oh, never mind. I'm not going to do that because it won't let you run it if it's in trial mode. So let's just, sorry I'm rambling here, but if you're in trial mode, it actually has a watermark grid. I'm just going to put 2 lines on here, but if you're in trial, you're familiar with the fact that it has this tic-tac-toe grid on the image. So what happens if you run these face detect modes, it's going to have paths of white. So it's going to, if you run this, see the magic wand selects all this stuff because of that trial mode grid. I don't really have a way around that unless I completely redid the way the trial mode works, which I'm not going to do. But if you see now, if we ran the this auto clear with that grid on the image, it didn't actually clear anything. Anyway, that's about it. Thanks for watching, and if you're interested at all in Easy Green Screen, please be sure to visit our website. That is pixnub.com.